Anna Morgan, a self-made, highly respected event planner from Boston, marries into the wealthy Caldwell family. Over 5 years, she is subtly marginalized, betrayed, and ultimately discovered evidence of Sean's affair and his family's financial skullduggery. At Eleanor Caldwell's 70th birthday dinner in Rome, Anna is intentionally left without a seat as a public humiliation. Instead of exploding, she calmly cancels every vendor, reverses payments, most of which she had guaranteed, and exposes the Caldwells' financial rot. Their facade collapses publicly. Anna walks away with dignity, legal protections, and renewed professional success. The terrace glowed like a promise, low candles, hand-stitched menus, the Colosseum framed in the amber dusk. Anna Morgan stood at the balustrade, palms flat against cool stone, and let Rome breathe into her. The city smelled of lemon trees and oven heat, of history and strangers' secrets. For a moment she allowed herself to be only an observer, not the woman who had spent 5 years learning how other people wanted the world to look. Someone cleared a throat behind her. "You did this." Sean's voice, quiet, proud. He joined her at the rail, scent of aftershave and expectation. The first 6 months of their marriage had been like this. Easy laughter, a hand that lingered, a man who said the right things in the right rooms. Anna remembered arranging the ballroom at the Four Seasons, the way his eyes had crinkled when the place looked perfect. That was how she fell. Not for birthright, not for silk gloves and old ledger books, but for the rare look of true appreciation from another grown-up. Tonight should have been soft and simple, Eleanor Caldwell's 70th birthday, a dinner that would read like lineage and taste. Anna had planned every moment, the escort cars, the sommeliers, the discreet lighting that made diamond work without shouting. It was what she did, turned gatherings into memory. It had made her real things a small, expensive business in Boston, a steady line of referrals, a reputation for discretion that paid in late-night messages and handshakes. "You look beautiful," Sean said now. She accepted the compliment and pivoted into a professional check. Did the linens match the sample? Did Marco have the cake temperature right? She loved the precise hum of logistics, the private theater of it. Under that hum, another sound had slowly risen over the last 2 years. The soft dismissal of her competence, a laugh at a family table, the way someone else recited one of her ideas as if it had always been theirs. Little things, shoes that appeared where she hadn't put them, names left off guest lists that could be shrugged away until they couldn't. "Are you ready?" Eleanor's voice floated from the doorway, silk and impatience. The room tilted toward a different gravity now, toward ritual. The family clustered, Richard flattering, Melissa posturing, cousins checking notes. Anna felt the air itself divide into insiders and others. There had been a time she might have leaned in for the warmth of being wanted. Tonight, a small knot of cold formed under her breast. She traced the edge of the stone with the pad of her thumb as if reading Braille. It had been 5 years since she'd arrived in Boston with a business plan and bruised hands, 6 years since she'd first redesigned Sean's aunt's charity gala. That work had been the currency that bought her into their orbit, not exactly acceptance, but proximity. Over the years, proximity had proved expensive, favors unpaid, invoices lost in polite conversation, gentle jokes about where she'd come from. "Anna has such a good eye," Eleanor would coo, patting her hand with condescension that smelled faintly of perfumed lemon. A bell chimed. Outside, the city was folding into night. Anna felt 2 versions of herself, the woman who could balance 1,000 names on a schedule and the woman who'd once believed a smile would change privilege. She inhaled and, for the first time in a long time, let herself notice something new. Courage was not a flare-up of heat. It was a decision made in a room full of chandeliers. She took one last look at the terrace, at the stone and the city and the careful, patient sky. Then she reached for her clutch and walked inside. The restaurant smelled of butter and rosemary. Waiters moved like rehearsed ghosts between dishes. Anna's face remained a still mask while she catalogued tableware, napkin folds, the exact dip of a candle's flame. Her professional eye saw everything. Her personal life had taught her to see small things as the shape of a larger narrative. A seating chart, that was where it had begun to feel purposeful. Months earlier, when she'd sent the PDF with her calligraphed place cards, someone had replied with a small smile and "we'll see." Sean had said nothing when the changes came through, an extra name here, a reshuffling there. It could have been confusion, he'd offered. Or the family's way of doing things. Anna had practiced patience. She had also learned to catalog evidence. Back at their Beacon Hill home, she'd stumbled upon messages on his phone, threads with a woman named Vanessa, old photos, plans, then the clincher, a text that spoke of a baby. Shock had come in a cold, detailed way. Screenshots, dates, a calendar reminder. When she confronted Sean, his voice had been soft with distance. "It's complicated," he'd said. "Vanessa is history in some ways. She is not the family I would choose, but, and what about me?" she'd asked. He'd shrugged. "You know my mother. You know my mother." The phrase landed, small and lethal. If she had spoken in the first rush of agony, she might have demanded explanations. Instead, she did what she always did under pressure. She gathered facts. Contracts, bank statements, the name of the family attorney who drafted a draft divorce script. The documents had been clinical, an exit plan, a proposed settlement that read like an insult. The seating plan for Eleanor's night, labeled "final," made her stomach drop. They had mapped a public unseating. In Rome, the slights became choreography. A whispered itinerary here, a family-only suggestion there, hushed laughter at shops when she asked to join. The city seemed complicit, history at every corner, a sense of people who'd been written into place forever. Anna's hands tightened on a hotel brochure one morning when she realized she, too, had been written into a role, the talented accessory. Still, she continued to work. Professionals in their industry are rarely reckless. She contacted vendors, smoothed last-minute headaches, negotiated a dessert substitution when a local supplier faltered. All the while she built a hidden ledger, copies of emails, bank PDFs, contract clauses that placed vendor guarantees in her company's name. She kept that archive like a seed packet, small, quiet, ready. The day before the dinner, she watched Sean step away for a brief meeting. His briefcase sat open and an envelope, thick with papers, gaped like a wound. Separation papers, attorney headers, signature lines, the inevitability became a physical thing she could touch. That night she lay awake in the dark listening to Rome breathe under their window. Instead of rage, she felt a low, tempered focus. For months she had rehearsed her public mask. Now she planned a private litany of reversals. There are moments when anger chooses its vehicle. Anna chose precision. She called the villa, the yacht, the vineyard, all cancellations possible, all refunds to be reclaimed. She wrote emails with the same calm she used to write event briefs, attaching the authority lines that proved her company's signature. It felt, in that strange way, like preparing an event. The difference was the event was a dismantling. At dinner's final rehearsal, the family posed for a photograph on the hotel steps. Eleanor placed her hand on Sean's shoulder, a small, possessive gesture. Anna smiled politely for the camera, but inwardly she catalogued the exact placement of each person. Who would flinch? Who would be first to look away? She stood in the picture like someone who had exacted her own terms, composed, careful, the only woman who knew how the stage would fall. At the business center, the concierge voice seemed too loud, as if the whole world were listening in on her private processing. Anna printed the final confirmation binders, then paused when she heard Eleanor's clipped tone through thin wall panels. "There will be 12 seats, not 13. No questions." The word 13 landed like a stone. It was not an error. It was orchestration. Everything slotted together. The hidden draft divorce, the amusing joke about an accidental omission, the shrugs that would read like neutral concern. They had designed her disappearance to look voluntary, to let the world assume she chose herself out. The revelation was both humiliation and liberation, a map of their cruelty down to the smallest detail. For a second she felt the old impulse, collapse, make noise, ruin the evening by ruining them. Then the training of a lifetime took over. She had always believed that events could be engineered. If they had built a spectacle to send her out, she could invert their stage. She left the business center with a small, secret smile. At Aroma, the rooftop restaurant she'd scouted, she moved like a ghost through her own memory of arrangements. Marco, the maitre d', greeted her with a discreet nod. "Everything is planned?" he asked, voice low enough to pass between allies. Anna handed him an envelope, a set of digitally stamped cancellations, payment reversals, and a note with her corporate signatory. For years, she had extended credit lines, guarantees, and professional favors in good faith. Tonight, those guarantees were the tool she used to pull a thread. Back in the hotel lobby, the family gathered for the short drive in sleek black cars. Eleanor's laugh was the sound of someone who expected the world to match her design. Sean took her arm. He was the prince of small, practiced comforts. Anna felt the scene as if she were reading a script she'd once helped rewrite for them. Now she knew every beat. She arrived at the restaurant early, performing a private check. Salt here, candle height there, her own name written on a menu sample in the hand that had planned 1,000 nights. Then she moved into the crowd and let ritual take its course. The table filled, plates began to arrive, champagne was uncorked. Conversation pooled around the table in waves. When it happened, it was almost absurd in its simplicity. She reached for her place card. There wasn't one. No setting, no chair. A circle with an empty space like an absent tooth. Sean laughed, the sound engineered to neutralize any tension. "Oops, guess we miscounted." The family smiled, obliging the laugh like actors following cues. Something inside her unglued in that moment, but not into spectacle. It unglued into calm. She could have stood, demanded accountability, exposed every email and ledger in a single shriek. Instead, Anna left the table. Not a run. Not a storm. She took measured steps out into a crowd of diners and into a future she would now determine. Outside, she sat at a small cafe under a street lamp and made 30 minutes of choices that would rewrite what they had done to her. She sent the first emails, payment reversals to Marco, cancellation confirmations to the villa and vineyard, a quiet note to the yacht captain securing a refund. Her fingers moved with the professionalism she'd honed for years. Each click was a stitch undone. Sean started with temper, then confusion, then fear in his messages. He called. She did not answer. The family's celebration, their carefully curated social moment, teetered. The subtle joke, the missing chair, had become the hinge that swung everything. Back inside the restaurant, Marco approached the table, calm professionalism cracking like a frost line. A tablet displayed the returned funds. Richard's face strained. Eleanor's smile thinned into something raw. People whispered. Phones came out. Anna watched the tableau with a clarity that felt almost surgical. She had not wanted to hurt. She had wanted truth exposed in a way only truth could be felt, publicly, where reputation is currency. The murmurs grew into a current that moved through the restaurant like cold water. Servers slowed, candles burned steady and small. At table's head, Richard kept asking questions. Eleanor clung to a practiced poise that now seemed paper-thin. Sean's face lit with a new, pale urgency as he scrolled through the message she'd sent, not malicious, but precise, all deposits reversed. Vendor guarantees withdrawn. Please provide payment. At home, secrets had been paper and screen. Here they turned into social combustion. People at neighboring tables cupped faces, fingers flew toward phones. Someone near the bar murmured a name that landed like a bell. Isn't that the Caldwell account? The Caldwells had a veneer of immortality. When veneers crack, they sound louder than the thing underneath. Anna watched, external and internal in the same breath. Her planner's heart cataloged reactions as if reading a guest list. Which friend would run to the PR phones? Who would check the accounts? Who would sigh and look away? She noticed small, human things, Melissa's hand trembling around a fork, Thomas leaning close to whisper, while eyes darted sideways like rabbits in a field. Sean left his seat, almost knocking his chair in his haste, then returned, anger rising into panic. His voice, when it came across the table, was not the comfortable cadence she'd known. Anna, this is, he began. She cut across the sentence with an evenness she'd learned through boardrooms and vendor calls. If you want to fix this, she said, there are ways to do it. Her tone left room for the man who'd once stood with her and the coward who hadn't. But fixing reputations doesn't fix the truth. Marco moved like an old colleague, protecting both his restaurant and the truth of the night. He told the table plainly, quiet but firm, that without new guarantees the dinner could not proceed on credit. Someone who'd laughed moments ago gaped. Eleanor's eyes darted, inventorying the room for salvage. The family's concierge whispers became loud phone calls. Outside, Anna felt something that was not triumph exactly. It was relief, a physical unclenching. She'd chosen drama not in the sense of performance, but as an engineered revelation. The mechanics of power had been used against her for years. Tonight she had used the same mechanics to make a small, unavoidable light. Back at the table the mood shifted from puzzled to frightened. The guests, old money, diplomats, society names, began to understand the scale of what the Caldwells had been carrying. A missed transfer here, an offshore withdrawal there, a bond that had lost value and a line of credit maxed. The whispers traveled to the edges of the room and found hungry ears. Sean's phone vibrated again. His hand moved with an animal quickness toward it, then away. He had known hints were fragile things. He had not expected them to be catalogued. He was not a bad man in the movies, simply a man with a small, fatal cowardice. He had the chance to stand and tell a truth that might cost him dearly, but might also buy him back some measure of human decency. He didn't. He opened his mouth repeatedly, searching for answers like a diver searching for sunlight. Anna rose from her seat at the alcove where she'd been watching. She moved toward the table not to argue now, but to close a book. People looked up. Some faces were defiant, some shocked, some already pivoting their phone cameras. Eleanor sharpened her tone into accusation. "How dare you?" she began. Anna didn't shout. She looked at each face as if cataloging them for an exhibit, then spoke slowly enough for everyone to translate it into their own language of power and humiliation. "Seems I'm not family." The words were small, precise, and when she turned to leave she carried with her something that had been growing in her chest for years. Not revenge, but the right to choose the terms of her exit. Her voice slid through the air like glass. The room made space for the sound of it. Silence folded in that space, the kind that arrives when people realize the joke was never a joke. Eleanor's face, which had been a practiced mask of social ease, shuddered like a window slammed by wind. Sean fumbled with a response. "Anna, please," he tried the conciliatory tone he'd used when smoothing over a vendor's complaint. But there was no vendor to soothe here, nothing that could be rearranged into pleasantness. He read the messages, the bank screenshots, the contract excerpts. The color drained from his face. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wet with something like panic. Anna felt no gloating. The spectacle was not catharsis so much as confirmation. The life she'd been building in this marriage had been contingent and performative. She had been expected to take applause for making other people's lives look better and be small in her own. Tonight she returned the favor with a truth that refused the polite name of discretion. It escalated quickly. A friend at the table whispered that the hotel had already messaged their account to demand full payment for the week. Others called numbers that rang into automated systems patched to accountants and anxious assistants. Voices rose. Confrontations that were once private now had witnesses. Tiny hypocrisies suddenly mattered. Sean's hand shook when he picked up the tablet Marco held out. The line items translated into a possible cascade. Creditors called. Board members reconsidered. Foundation donors reeled. It was a paper earthquake. The Caldwells had kept their lives balanced on reputational columns. Reputation shifted and the scaffolding buckled. "Why did you do it?" Sean asked finally, and the question wasn't only about the moment, it was about 5 years of a woman quietly cataloging indignities. Anna answered without heat, with the flat, steady voice of a woman who had written more contracts than men in the room had handshake deals. "I did what any professional would do when their name and financial liability are used without consent. I reclaimed what was mine and I refused to be their public prop." Eleanor shrieked the way a person who's been exposed will shriek, equal parts fury and terror. Her lights had always been reputational currency. Here, in the city that made ruins look noble, she found herself unmoored. "You ruined my birthday," she cried. "No," Anna said. "You revealed who you always were." The sentence landed like a verdict, but it was not delivered with triumph. It was a declaration of fact. Some of the diners turned away. Others leaned in, hungry for scandal. Camera phones bloomed like a field of blinking eyes. A waiter, young and embarrassed, stepped between them and murmured an apology that sounded like an absolution. Anna felt the attention like wind, not warmth. Sean rose, pleading with the fury of a man whose empire is suddenly in view. "We can fix this," he said. "Call the bank. We'll sort it out." "You can fix it," Anna answered, "by telling the truth. Or you can keep lying and watch the structure collapse. That choice is yours." She left the table under a few whispered curses and the thin applause of friends hoping to curry favor. She walked down the stone steps, her heels measured, her shoulders square. Outside, Rome's night stretched and the city hummed with people who belonged there by birth or choice. Anna hailed a small cab and rode back to the hotel not as a defeated woman, but as one who had finally closed a well-worn door. 2 days later, the story rippled through Boston in small, precise waves. The Globe ran an item low on page A that ballooned into conversations over coffee tables and at charity galas. Donors asked questions. Boards that once invited Eleanor to chair committees sent quiet letters. Vanessa's pregnancy and Sean's silence became a rumor that turned into a public timeline, then settled into a quiet, shameful confirmation. Anna sat in her new apartment on Beacon Hill, a place she'd rented before the marriage and now inhabited by her alone, and cataloged what she would take and what she would leave. She boxed only what could not be disputed as hers, a drawer of event ribbons, a small stack of first editions she'd collected, the ring she had bought for herself the year her company first turned a profit. Everything else she left. There was an odd lightness to the act, like leaving an ill-fitting glove. Sean came once, unannounced, the week after she returned. He looked as if the boilerplate polish had been sanded away. The man who had preferred comfort over courage stood before her with his head bowed. He begged. He offered numbers and NDAs and ways to keep quiet. Anna listened politely and then handed him a printed list of documents, copies of the emails she had forwarded to her lawyer, a simple statement of what she wanted, her legal rights and the autonomy to keep her name clean. "What do you want?" he asked, almost childlike in his need. "Truth," she said. "And the ability to continue to live my life without your family's shadow." He left in a rain that made the windows run like watercolor. The city blurred and cleaned itself in the way rain does. Anna felt none of the post-victory illusions she'd once fantasized about. Pride was there, soft and steady, so was loss. She had not wanted the wreckage. She had wanted reality, that honest, sometimes brutal thing. Business did what careful businesses do. Clients that valued discretion and competence did not desert her. If anything, her professional life prospered. Vendors who had once whispered about the Caldwell name now shook her hand with respect. The irony was a kind of justice. Reputations built on the backs of others crumble quietly in a world that values reputation above fact. Anna's reputation had been earned by labor. It stuck. Months later, an invitation arrived. The Caldwell Circle, desperate now, asked for a bid. She smiled and taped the RSVP into a book she kept on the shelf, declined. She had learned the fine geometry of boundaries, how much of oneself you could safely let in the world, and how much you had to keep private like a seed. On a warm day in late summer, she found herself on a terrace on the Amalfi Coast, contract in hand, arranging a wedding for clients who treated her as the architect of memory, not a background prop. The sky was wide, uncompromising. She adjusted a bouquet, laughed with a pastry chef about tartlets gone wrong, and for the first time in a long while, let herself be simply present. She raised a glass to a horizon that had no seat assigned, to a life she had chosen on her terms. The missing chair in Rome had been a map, not an execution. It had shown her the border between what belonged to her and what belonged to performance. As the Mediterranean glittered below and the guests drifted into the light, Anna felt a quiet, resolute satisfaction. She had not only reclaimed her dignity, she had reclaimed the story she would tell about herself.